What's going on, YouTube? It's Tej, back again with another 2-round NFL mock draft, man. We are in the thick of it now. It is an exciting time of the year for me, and I'm excited to bring this 2-round mock draft to you. Of course, let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who goes too high? Who goes too low? Who's your favorite team? And what do you think about the haul that I gave your squad? Also, real quick before we get started, the next video you're going to see on this channel is going to be a pretty exciting one. So definitely keep tabs on the channel. Got some big news to share about me, the draft coverage, what it's going to be here, so on and so forth. So really excited to talk about that in my next video up on the channel. So again, be sure to subscribe if you're not. Keep your eyes on the channel for when I make that announcement. I believe it's going to be towards the end of December, so we got a little bit of time, but definitely some big news, especially if you like my NFL draft content. Definitely want to keep your eyes peeled on that. Well, let's go ahead and kick things off here. And no shock, Travis Hunter, he's going to be the #1 player on my updated big board. Just the value it gives you at receiver and corner. Again, in case you're new here, I'm in the camp that I think he should play corner 75% of the time. Basically make him a full-time starter there at outside corner, and then figure out 15 to 20 snaps. Like what is that offensive personnel? What's that role? Is it a third down exclusive thing? Figure that out. Use him in those timely situations on offense. But I think his ball skills and just natural feel for the position, his eyes too, like all that just makes for such a special potential corner. So yeah, I think play him at corner, utilize him timely on offense. Travis Hunter right now, my #1 player on my big board. A couple quarterbacks can come off the board here. No real surprise. I still got Cam Ward as QB1. I finally kind of thought up the comp. I've been kind of describing him as Geno Smith with attributes, right? Like Geno coming out of West Virginia, about, maybe honestly Geno was a slightly better athlete, but, functional athleticism, the arm, talent. Felt like Geno coming out of West Virginia, but he's got this propensity to throw at different arm angles, so he's got a little bit of Stafford in there. Ultimately, I kind of just landed on, I think that's Jordan Love. I think, maybe he's Love with a little less arm talent, because, man, Love's arm coming out of Utah State was the reason I saw him as a first-round guy, and a big reason why he is as good as he is. But, yeah, I think I've landed on kind of Jordan Love as a loose comparison there for Cam Ward, maybe a little bit less arm talent, and if you've watched the Raiders this year, Aiden O'Connell, fumbling snap and, field goal territory, it's, that kind of epitomizes the quarterback situation this year for the Raiders. So they're definitely looking, as are the New York Giants, Shadir Sanders. We'll see about the whole where will Deion go, where won't Deion let him play. But I think the Big Apple is a market that the Sanders would like to tap into. And if you've watched the Giants over the last few weeks, they've given up. And obviously you move on from Daniel Jones as a starter to make it easier to move on from him this offseason. So they're in the market, and right now there's only going to be 2 quarterbacks that go in this 2-round mock draft. A lot of these guys I think are going to go back to school, should go back to school, and then the rest of the guys are all kind of like day 3 caliber type of dudes to me. So those are the only quarterbacks we get, and that's part of what makes this mock now so interesting. Like last year's class, you had such good talent falling down the rest of the board because quarterbacks were going so high in mocks, and ultimately what happened in the real draft. We don't get that same luxury this year, so it's really fascinating. We get to New England. You could go Ted McMillan here. Don't hate that whatsoever. I think Will Campbell's the best offensive lineman in this class. You hear Dane Brugler talk. The arm length's going to be just a smidge over 33 inches, so still on this, 33 inches. It sounds like it's going to be like 33 and a quarter. That being said, I know that's not like ideal, but it's kind of that Rashawn Slater territory, and with how good he plays and how much of a technician he is, I'm comfortable with it. Slater had like awesome movement skills. I think Campbell, he just knows how to play the position. Hand placement's fantastic. Ton of brute strength. I think he's going to be able to overcome, in the grand scheme of things, slightly shorter arms. And New England, you could go receiver, yes, but I'm going to say those guys develop going into year 2. They find a way to make a different splash move, maybe a T. Higgins in free agency, maybe a trade for Debo during this offseason to try to put weapons around Drake May and ergo leaving a big hole in the offensive line. I think Will Campbell's the perfect guy for the Pats. To the Carolina Panthers, Abdul Carter, he's been my edge one this whole process. You just can't teach first step juice like Abdul Carter has. And of course, you're going to get the Micah Parsons comps there. And I'm not sure he's going to be, top 3 edge rusher in the NFL. But man, again, one with his background from an off-ball linebacker standpoint does provide some interesting, potential usage there. But I think at the next level, let this kid pin his ears back and figure out ways to get to the quarterback. Again, first step juice is fantastic. Overall athletic front, like this guy's going to crush the combine. It's all great there. And he continues to get better and better about hand placement, adding more moves into his repertoire. I also think he has violent hands, right? Like this is not just a guy who wins with speed. There is punch in his game, right? He's got power. So, and the ability to turn that speed to power is certainly something that he's still, he's actually getting better at too. So yeah, big Abdul Carter guy, and I think the stock is going up for my top edge rusher in this class. Here's what I'm going to have Tetairoa McMillan come off the board, and I know what you might be saying, well, they just made the Devontae Adams trade. Look, at this point, it kind of feels like Rodgers is not going to be back, and if Rodgers is not back, you're not bringing back Devontae Adams. You're going to move on from that, free up the cap space. In that situation, whoever is playing quarterback for the Jets next year is staring Garrett Wilson and a bunch of Rodgers' old best friends who are probably a little bit past their prime, to put it lightly. So I think adding a receiver to that room, and I think right here at 6, right, like could go Kelvin Banks, flip Olu-Fashanu full-time to right tackle. I don't hate that, but I think between that or taking Tetairoa McMillan as an outside sacrificial X, Garrett Wilson moves into the slot full-time, we'll figure out the quarterback situation. I don't really think I'm comfortable drafting one here at 6. I think that's ultimately the play here for the New York Jets. Again, assuming that there's no Rodgers and there's no Devontae Adams next year. Speaking of Kelvin Banks, that's who's going to be the pick here at 7. Then we'll flip J.C. Latham back over to right tackle. That's where he was playing at Alabama. And ultimately, this is less about J.C. Latham, who I think has had some good moments this year as a rookie. And I think there's a lot of potential there. And honestly, he's played better this first year than maybe I would have anticipated, as like, kind of lukewarm on J.C. Latham. Didn't love him, didn't hate him, saw the potential, but I also saw a lot of work. But I'm intrigued by where Latham can go, especially if you do flip him back over to the right side. And Kelvin Banks, yeah, sure, some people see him as a guard, barring a crazy, short arm length that we get at the combine. I'm not anticipating that being a thing that I, then they flip on here. I think he's gonna be a tackle for me. Long story short, and put him in an offensive line room, coached by Bill Callahan. Sign me up for that. This dude has a ton of ability, and now you're looking at 2 first-round offensive tackles working with the best offensive line coach in the NFL. Maybe right now, like that's him or Jeff Stoutland, right? That's a good place to find yourself for the Titans. And again, most of this is not about Latham. It's more about Nicholas Petit-Frere. He's just, dare I say, unplayable right now. It's just bad, and he's just seemingly not getting any better, right? Like, you want to see these guys make strides in the right direction, improve. NPF just has not done that yet. All right, a couple of Michigan Wolverines going to come off the board here. Mason Graham. I do think the Browns' interior defensive line is the one spot where, I love Myles Garrett, obviously, and they put some resources into that edge group on the other side of Myles Garrett. Obviously, they traded one of those pieces away in Zadarius Smith, but that interior is definitely a spot where they can get better. Ideal one for me is Mason Graham. What he could do as a run stopper is fantastic. Of course, he brings plenty of pass rush juice. He's a super quick athlete, very good with his hands, a lot of moves in his repertoire. Mason Graham, really one of the more complete interior defensive linemen I've seen. A little bit of a slower start this year, so you kind of look at that, and ultimately, I just don't think he's as a caliber of prospect as maybe Quinnen Williams was, who I was hoping he'd be able to put himself in that conversation to be right there with Quinnen with best interior defensive lineman I've ever scouted. I do think he's probably a little half step, maybe a tier below Quinnen Williams, but he's still awesome, and I'm still more than comfortable drafting him here in the top 8, especially if I'm Cleveland, and again, that's the one spot where I'm looking to beef up. If you've watched the Cincinnati Bengals this year, you know the cornerback play is atrocious. So CB1 for me, Will Johnson. Like I said, he's not going to play the rest of this year. I said that back when he first got hurt. This Michigan team's just, hey, huge win against Ohio State. Good on them. That almost cures everything else that's happened this season in a lot of ways. But it's been a bit of a step backwards this year in regards to tape for Johnson. Part of that is definitely the injury, and then the fact that he sits out the rest of the year. Not the way you would want to see him go out. Again, kind of like Mason Graham, maybe we set our expectations a little too high for where really Michigan was, and in turn how that affects these two guys. But you go back to the tape, not this year, but the year before that, CB1 potential all over it. And it's not like he played bad this year by any stretch. It's just he went from clear cut, no doubt, CB1 to wish he could have ended his career on a better note there. But for Cincinnati, beggars can't be choosers here. They need to inject some talent into that secondary, and Will Johnson is a huge step in the right direction for just that. New Orleans Saints, I'm going to go Luther Burden. They have a couple of really nice field stretchers. Chris Olave, a guy that I think 10-plus yards down the field, one of the best route runners in football. And Rashid Shaheed is a spark plug anytime he's on the field. Obviously, he's on IR right now. But I think Luther Burden opens up this offense to do some more yards after the catch, easy stuff. And it's going to be interesting. Obviously, you move on from a head coach midseason. Dennis Allen out, Rizzi in. We'll see what happens to Clint Kubiak. I could see where he's an offensive coordinator that gets poached, and another team just brings him onto that same position, and maybe he goes and signs on to a team that he thinks is more equipped to be a contender. But if they decide to keep him around, and if they can keep him around, a lot of Deebo Samuel comps are going to be out there too for Luther Burden. So naturally, this kind of made a lot of sense in my mind too. If they can keep Clint Kubiak there, he should know as well as anybody across the league how to use Luther Burden, which is a little upsetting because I feel like Missouri kind of forgot how to use him this year, which is disappointing. His production took a step back, but it's not the player. I think it's just Missouri as a whole, maybe a team that was a little too overhyped. And myself included, I was really pumped about the Tigers this year, but I think they didn't use Burden to his fullest extent. I think he's going to be a great pro. Would be really curious about him being that underneath, yards after the catch, easy offense guy to complement Olave and Shaheed in that offense. Gonna do something a little different here. Chicago Bears. I'm gonna go Walter Nolan. Is this not, Eberflus is gone, but is this not like the perfect 3-tech for like Matt Eberflus, what he's been looking for? And obviously coaching change. We'll see what they decide to do. I've been thinking about this head coaching job for like nonstop. This has kind of become my own Roman Empire. A lot of different directions they could go with. You could go with that leader type of a Mike Vrabel. I know a lot of Bears fans want that. You could also go Jesse Minter, right? Like they didn't fire Eberflus. Felt like Harbaugh was going to be a guy in that mix. Maybe they go get their own, Harbaugh way with one of his disciples, Jesse Minter. Keep Thomas Brown as the OC. That could be interesting. I also think Joe Brady's a name to watch for this one. Just with what he's been able to do to shift that Buffalo offense. Could Chicago see him as the guy to do that? Maybe. All that to say, a lot of question marks about what that defense is going to be, but I do think it's an interior defensive line that could use a little bit more juice. And again, Eberflus is gone, but man, this is that 3-tech that he had been looking for. Walter Nolan finally playing like that 5-star prospect he was coming out of high school. Love the athleticism. He's definitely a 3-tech more than like a 3 or a 1, like we'll talk about here with the next pick and Kenneth Grant. But nonetheless, love the athleticism, love the fire off the line of scrimmage, and I think the hand usage keeps getting better and better and better, and I think his best days are ahead of him at the NFL level. As spoiled just a moment ago, Kenneth Grant can be the pick here at for Miami. They just, like Zach Steeler's a good player. Calais Campbell is solid when he's, able to play, but at his age, you just can't ask him to play a full-time role. And, is he going to come back next year? He's obviously on a 1-year flyer just about every year. I think we're looking for a long-term fixture there. Kenneth Grant is a sick athlete, one of the best run stoppers in college football, and because of that athleticism, you see flashes of it there in the pass rush game. Can he take some steps forward? And, kind of similar to Christian Wilkins, right? Like, awesome run defender. Definitely had more pass rush juice, in my opinion, than Kenneth Grant does at this point. But Christian Wilkins, after that rookie year, just kept getting better and better and better as a pass rusher and earned that huge contract from the Raiders because of it. So I want to see if they can work that same magic here with Kenneth Grant. And also I think his athleticism, right? Anthony Weaver there. We'll talk about him with that second pick for Miami too. Could he almost look at Kenneth Grant and maybe like just Madubuike? Again, Grant, great run defender. Madubuike, not necessarily a strength, but just from like an athletic standpoint, I wonder if they could try to use him in that type of disruptor role as well, specifically on passing downs. A lot of interesting what ifs there. I could play it with Grant to the Miami Dolphins. Dallas Cowboys fans, you can rejoice. I'm going to give you Ashton Jeanty. You win the Jeanty sweepstakes. But I'll be honest, I think Marcus Mosher on X has done a great job highlighting this. He's a huge Cowboys fan. The more you look at the Cowboys, the more you see, Dowdle's not awesome, but he's not the problem. And honestly, the more you watch that team, the more you see the holes in the roster, and you start to reprioritize the needs on this team. So this is probably going to be the last mock where I go running back first round for Dallas, because there's holes all around that team, to be honest with you. Almost played this out a little differently where Burden came here. I think that's a guy they should definitely be targeting. Would be really fascinated by that. Or a lot of different ways you can go here. Defensive line, corner, possibilities are endless. And again, the more you watch the Cowboys, the more you're like, they have a hole at running back, but is it the biggest hole in this roster? I don't think so. All I have to say to sell the pick here, Jeanty's RB1. Honestly, I'm at the point now where his comp's going to be LaDainian Tomlinson. The man is just an absolute alien with the contact balance, the shiftiness, the agility, the long speed. They haven't even really used him as a pass catcher, but he can do that. That's in his bag, too. So, definitely would provide some juice in the Dallas backfield. No doubt about it. San Francisco 49ers here at 14. Man, I would just love to see this pick happen. I'm going to double down on D-line for the 49ers in this. But James Pierce Jr. is this is what they wanted Chase Young to be when they made that trade. He played okay football. This is who they wanted Drake Jackson to be when they drafted him out of USC. I think James Pierce Jr. is just it's not really fair to compare it to Chase Young because Chase Young was a more known commodity by that point, and we knew he wasn't living up to second overall expectations. That being said, Pierce to Drake Jackson, Pierce blows him out of the water as a prospect. And I liked Drake Jackson, but one was clearly a day 2 guy and one's clearly a day 1 guy. maybe hasn't been the year that people were expecting from Pierce, right? Like top 5, maybe number 1 overall pick type of year. But he's still a super lean, bendy, athletic edge rusher. 6'5", 245, can maybe add a little bit of mass on there, but first step quicks and that bend, I'm not sure I'm really in a rush to change his body type. And especially as the number 2 edge opposite of Bosa, I think I'm cool with his body type and how it plays as a compliment to Nick Bosa. But yeah, I would love this pick here for San Francisco. To the Indianapolis Colts, having some fun here. Man, I'm really excited to dive back into the tight end tape because, one, the more I hear from people in this space that I trust, the depth of this tight end class is really impressive. And I've already started to watch some other guys there, and I've been really intrigued by who those day 2 guys might be, like Gunnar Helm from Texas. He almost made it in this mock. But, man, I've kind of put off watching Loveland and Warren one more time just because I kind of want to wait until the year's done and I have as much tape as possible. There's a real shot that Warren ends up passing Loveland because I think the blocking is not nearly as bad as maybe what I went into the season thinking it would be. Not that I thought it'd be bad, but I think he can play in line, man. And he's just such a versatile player and such a good athlete that you look at how Penn State's using him, and part of that's they have no disrespect here, but next to no receiver talent, so they have to get creative with how they use Warren because he's kind of the heartbeat of that offense. That said, that athleticism, you can do something like that. So, man, Indianapolis, they could use an upgraded tight end. Be really curious to see what they could do with Tyler Warren. I think Shane Steichen's a good offensive mind too, so I'd be really curious about his usage with Tyler Warren. And it's just one more interesting athletic body type, right? Like, you already got to tackle Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman. Now you got to deal with Tyler Warren. Like, I just think it's one more frustrating body type to tackle. So I really like that as an addition to that Colts offense. Tampa Bay here at 16. I feel like this would be next to best case scenario, right? Like Nick Scourton, a 6'4", 285-pound edge, and you hear that and you're like, oh, well, he's just a big power rusher. This guy's way more nimble than you would think for someone who's 285 pounds, has a wide repertoire of moves. Not necessarily that he's like the most finesse rusher, but especially think that last year at Purdue, he showcases there's more to this 285-pound edge rusher than you would normally think. He's got a little bit more finesse in his game. And man, there's been a couple games this year for A&M, like that Missouri game a handful of weeks back, where it's like this dude has game record potential written all over him. And also, like, I think he's just a really nice compliment to Yaya Diaby, who is not going to win with, size and length like Scourton can. But Scourton, again, brings that finesse, can bring a little bit more to the table than what you would just normally assume for someone with that body type. So I think it brings a lot more to that room, and I think it also makes Yaya Diaby more potent. He's going to see less double teams. He's going to become like the number 2 edge rusher on this team. Ultimately, I think this is something this team needs to do. I'm just like, yeah, that defensive side of the ball for Tampa, like a lot of different directions they could go, and I'm just like, Todd Bowles, man, I wish I could talk to the guy. I want to get inside his head. Anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about the Los Angeles Rams. I don't think I've gone offensive tackle for the Rams yet in any of my mocks, but it's going to be something they have to address. Havenstein's missed so much time. He's getting up there in age. Left tackle, I don't think it's been disastrous. Not like season ending, but it's still a spot where they can get better. And I stand by it, man. I said this on Twitter the other day. Follow me if you're not already, or X, I should say. But Simmons was playing his way to be my OT1. And I mean, Paris Johnson Jr. was my OT1. I kind of see these two very similarly. Really big, nimble athletes that can get to the second level in the run game, have plenty of anchor that plays in the pass game. And like, you still got to figure out some of the hand usage. I felt like that's where Paris struggled his rookie year. Like, he's just not refined there fully. And Simmons, now missing the rest of the season, is not going to get any more refinement there. But that's a risk I'm willing to take on just with the body type and the athletic profile that I think's there. So I would love to see this. And, I know the Rams have moved to more gap, especially inside the red zone, but there's still some zone stuff in there for Simmons. And no matter what, I also think there's a good amount of power in his game as well. So I think he fits that new age kind of Rams gap scheme type of stuff. So yeah, no questions there, Josh Simmons. And I know the injury will scare some people off, but I'm pretty confident in saying he's going to be a top 20 pick just because of the tape leading up to that, the athletic profile. Team's going to take a chance on him. To the Arizona Cardinals here at 18. I'm going to go with Alfred Collins, man. Another guy who's been a big riser. Violent, heavy-hitting defensive lineman with plenty of juice and plenty of quicks to go with it. Like, I don't think he's Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy was this close to being one of my blue chippers last year. He was like the first guy right outside that on my big board. Alfred Collins is not quite there yet, but man, been really impressed with him this season. And I think especially over the last month or so, this man's just found another gear and has been able to take games over for that Texas defensive line. But love the athletic profile. Love how violent he is with his hands and how much power he can play with. Could play the 1, could play the 3. So you get some more versatility, kind of closer to Grant there than I would say a Walter Nolan, who's just going to be a 3 tech. So yeah, I like what he can do here for Arizona. And as that interior guy, you're going to be moving Darius Robinson around. A couple of nice edge rushers. Hopefully BJ Ojulari can come back to 100%. Now we're starting to figure out that defensive line in Arizona. All right, on to the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to go with Jalen Walker. I know he's in here as a linebacker. I see him as an edge rusher, not an off-ball linebacker. But Raheem Morris could use him as a linebacker, right? Like Ernest Jones had 6 sacks with the Rams this last year before Morris became the head coach in Atlanta. Could they use him like that? Maybe. But I'd almost just be, especially with what I'm going to do with my next pick, I'm looking at this as Walker's going to be my full-time edge rusher. And as a replacement to Matt Judon / go-to guy, Walker's off-ball tape isn't super impressive, but man, I think there's something there as a pass rusher. Very violent, very physical player, a lot of play strength, and just going to be a guy to watch once they get into assuming they get into the college football playoff. Like, big moments. Could totally see this being one of those guys that steals the show and becomes like the next Georgia defender that we're all talking about through the course of the playoff. Like, I think he's that good. So, really excited about his prospects. Also, low moving cost. Shout out to the NFL Stock Exchange. Really easy move, I should say, proposed here for Jalen Walker. Seattle Seahawks. I find myself doing this pick more and more, and I don't mean to be so boring for Seattle, but Abe Lucas has been really good, and he's been a huge reason why this offensive line's taken steps in the right direction. So you don't have to do this, but at the same time, availability is a huge part of the equation for Abe Lucas, and the fact of the matter is he's been playing good, but he's had so many injuries that you're almost just kind of waiting for the next one to arise. So I'm going to go Cam Williams here. Abe Lucas contingent. I think there's a world where maybe you could have both those guys play on the same field, but I'm not entirely sure. The plus side of this, in a world where Lucas does continue to play well and maybe he doesn't get hurt, Cam Williams has only got 1 year of college starting experience. So yeah, you love the movement skills. You love how big and strong this guy is. And he's popped as a first-year guy, but he's also got some flaws in there, and he gets a little handsy. He gets called for a lot of flags. It might be ideal to let him sit for a year behind Abe Lucas if Abe Lucas can stay healthy for an entire season. And then maybe you reevaluate this spot if that's the case. But with what we know about Abe Lucas, it's hard to bank on that. So I like going Cam Williams here at pick number 20. Washington Commanders here at 21. I'm going back more of the same, man. You land someone like a Marshawn Lattimore, who I'm like eager to see what he looks like in Dan Quinn's defense. I beg your pardon. And now I'm just like craving the idea of them drafting a Siobhan Revell. This type of athletic man coverage upside type of play with great ball skills, partnered up with Marshawn Lattimore. I'm putting a lot of weight here on the shoulders of Siobhan Revell, but if he does pan out and he's the player and he lives up to the upside that I think is there, him plus Lattimore could quickly become one of the better cornerback tandems in the NFL. And part of that's Lattimore's awesome when he's healthy. But I really buy into the upside of Siobhan Revell. And I've said this 1,000 times. Yes, he had a big injury, but guys are coming back from ACL injuries pretty easily. Also, Shrine Bowl acceptee here, Siobhan Revell, so I'm hoping we get to see him in action down in Frisco. And like I said, guys are coming back from this knee injury all the time, and there's not really a game on the ECU schedule that was going to make you change your mind about Revell if you weren't bought in, or make you kind of change your mind if you really like him. There's just not really a huge daunting challenge, at least from a receiver-corner matchup standpoint, on the schedule this year for ECU. So if you liked the tape last year, you're going to probably feel that same way if he played all of this year, at least in my opinion. All right, let's get on to the Houston Texans here at pick number 22. This interior offensive line's got to get figured out, so I'm seeing this a ton of mocks. I'm gonna ride the coattails there. Tyler Booker, yeah, and probably right now interior offensive line 1 pretty comfortably for me. And he comes off the board here as IOL 1. I think solid movement skills kind of fit with that Slowick zone blocking scheme, assuming he's back as the OC. I also think there is good play strength there if they do decide to change it up, maybe go more gap. But I think this is kind of an offensive line that's now been tooled to fit that zone scheme. I think they'll give Slowick at least 1 more year. So I like adding in Booker, and at this point, like Kenyon Green's just a lost cause. They need to move on from that. So a shuffling may be happening there on the interior offensive line, but plugging in a Booker, I think, goes a long way to finding that right trio there on the inside of the O-line. All right, to the Denver Broncos. They're next up. I'm going to go Wyatt Milam. I think this guy's played his way into the first round. I think to this point he's still PFF's highest graded offensive lineman. He's just been fantastic this year, and that's West Virginia has not had necessarily the hardest of schedules, but it's not been a cakewalk either. He's had some tough matchups, but I love the size. I love him, especially in a zone blocking scheme. So, Denver, may not be the perfect fit to a T, but I also think there's play strength to fit with what Peyton wants to do. Garrett Bowles, last year of his contract. We'll see what happens in free agency. Maybe they bring him back. Maybe they figure something else out. But that being said, in the event that they don't, I think Wyatt Milam is the perfect replacement. And to the note about the zone scheme stuff, if you're going to bring in Mike McGlinchey to play right tackle, you're kind of like buying into some zone blocking stuff. So if you're going to do it for McGlinchey, why not go and put Milam into that same blocking scheme as well? To the Baltimore Ravens, this is just like best case scenario. This is like Baltimore Ravens getting the draft that they always seem to get. Best player available falls right in their lap, and team that drafted Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum, they're typically all over like position value, but sometimes these guys who are like almost exceed position value because of how good they are. Like Kyle Hamilton, blue chipper for me. Linderbaum was the best center prospect I had ever seen, especially at that point in my following of the NFL draft. They're good at football players. Take them at 12 and 24 or 12 and 25, whatever those two picks were. You jump on that opportunity. 14-25, actually, I think is what it was. And here, Malachi Starks, clear-cut best safety in the class. Marcus Williams has had a tough year, to say the least. And I wonder if next year there's not a whole lot of cap savings, but there is about $6 million worth. I wonder if they're just willing to bite the bullet there and replace him with Malachi Starks if the board were to play out this way. But yeah, this is just best player available fun to a team that, if you're going to give them BPA, they're going to take it 10 times out of 10. That's just kind of scary to think about. Malachi Starks plus Kyle Hamilton in that safety tandem. As a Steelers fan, specifically, that terrifies me. All right, let's get on to the Chargers. They're next up. I'm going to go Shamar Stewart. I'm going to go ahead and put a potential hot take flag down. I do believe I'm going to be at the Senior Bowl this year, which is super exciting. And don't be surprised if Shamar Stewart is this year's Darius Robinson, right? Like the guy who showcases length and play strength and can line up in a variety of spots across the defensive line and becomes one of these guys that's like, he may not be going to the top 10, but he's so good, how can we let him? He can't fall out of the first round, right? So I wouldn't be shocked if he's this year's Darius Robinson, big-time riser, or maybe one of the players of the week for practice or the game. Wouldn't shock me whatsoever, but 6'6", 290, long arms, really interesting body type. Moments this year for A&M. Nick Scourton gets a lot of eyes on him, but Stewart, not quite as good as Scourton in my opinion, but he hasn't been bad by any stretch of the imagination. He's only a few steps behind Scourton. So, and again, I think the variety of where you can line him up on the defensive line is very alluring for this Los Angeles Chargers team, who's got Bosa hitting free agency. Poona Ford potentially is someone who could leave this team. Mack also an expiring contract. Yeah, there's a lot of things that could be changing on that defensive line. So getting a guy who can fit in anywhere goes a long way to easing those concerns for me. Pittsburgh Steelers are next up. Here at 26, I'm going to go Benjamin Morrison. I would have him go higher in this mock, but the more I think about a hip injury for a corner, the more I'm like, I just need more information. If I get if word comes out he gets a clean report, all is good there, not going to be any long-term effects, he's shooting back up to my corner too. He's probably the pick to Washington, and I'm salivating over that as well. But until I get some more clarity on what that hip issue is, I am a little concerned. That said, even if the tape was maybe a step back this year, you go back a year, that's top tier number one corner type of stuff. Joey Porter Jr. is up and down. He leads the league in penalties, but he's also like such a physical player and can take away certain matchups that not many other corners can do. And then Dante Jackson's got a bunch of picks, but a lot of that is just kind of like, I think the right opportunities. He's been in the right place, right time. Dare I say it's just a little bit of luck kind of bouncing his way. I'm willing to move on from Dante Jackson, especially if Benjamin Morrison does get that clean, health report on his hip. So, yeah, I would lean towards Morrison over Dante Jackson pretty comfortably, just to see what the medical is. Another corner I want to talk about here, who's another really nice guy who's been a big riser, Trey Amos, man, ideal size and frame. I think he's going to be a really solid tester at Indianapolis. Long arms as well. This guy is a man coverage specialist. And now you get to be drafted by a team here in this mock for Green Bay it's cover 3 and it's man coverage. Like it's single high looks. It's Xavier McKinney roaming the field, doing what he does best. It's Evan Williams playing in the box, and it's corners, mostly on an island. Jair Alexander, one of the best corners of football. He can handle that. That number 2 corner spot, I think, has let down the Green Bay Packers from time to time. I think Trey Amos is that step up at that number 2 corner spot that they're looking for. And again, I just think he's like the perfect archetype of a corner to fit into that Jeff Hafley defense. Next, we get to the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to take Derek Harmon here. I think the last 3 weeks he's gone a little bit more quiet. I think part of that's just like people have caught on that he's a good football player, so he's just garnering a lot more attention. But, a guy that I do worry about how he holds up in the run game, he's over 300 pounds. Really curious to see what that official weight is at. Guys definitely, they add a little bit of something when it comes to those weigh-ins, so it's probably not a true number once we get it. But to me, he feels just a little bit light against the run. But you can't deny, because, he has changed his body a ton. Coming from Michigan State to Oregon, he's changed his body a ton, and he's changed his play style with it. He's much more of this gap shooter, win with speed. He's also got really good hands, which enables him to be able to shoot gaps, get off defenders quickly. So it definitely plays into his new model of body type and play style. So and I also just think with this Brian Flores defense, you're going to get a lot of one-on-ones, and he's going to crowd the line of scrimmage to where he may not see a whole lot of double teams to be moved off the line of scrimmage, moved off the point of attack. He may just get more one-on-ones, and with his quicks, with guys coming off the edge, up the middle with this guy can win one-on-ones with his quick. So I'm actually really intrigued by the fit with Minnesota. I'm not there with Derek Harmon as I think a lot of other people have gotten. But back end first round for a team like Minnesota, that's a fit I'm all in on. And I would certainly like it more with Minnesota than like a Buffalo, who I am going to give interior defensive line. But like him plus Oliver would make me really concerned about what they could be in the run game. Again, just projecting with what I think Harmon's going to be at the next level. All right, Philadelphia, you're next up here at 29. Mykel Williams, pardon me, this is a little lazy. First round Georgia defender for the Eagles. It's a little too easy, but I do think this is your Brandon Graham replacement, right? Like a guy who can win with power and length. Ding, 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 this is your guy. The pass rush production isn't great this year for Mykel Williams. He's also missed some time. And typically edge is a position that you can look at college production and it typically translates to the next level. Georgia, though, it's a little different, right? These guys don't get wide at tackles. It's more that 4-eye alignment, head up on an offensive tackle. So it's not really, a fair assessment there. But he is an awesome run defender. I think that could be coveted right away. And I know, like, they've drafted Nolan Smith. They put resources in. They signed Bryce Huff. They put in resources at the edge spot. And I do think they've gotten a little bit better as the year's gone on. But Mykel Williams is also a guy you can line up all over the place. And also, Philly, they're more than comfortable sitting a guy his rookie year if he's not ready, i.e. Nolan Smith, so... Got some time here for Mykel Williams. I'm just really intrigued by this guy who's built in a lab to play edge rusher, going to this team that's had great success developing trench talent. That would be a really fun landing spot. And it just continues the trend of these Georgia first-round guys on the defensive side of the ball for Howie Roseman. All right, Buffalo here at 30. Came down to one of two edge rushers. I'm going to go Jack Sawyer this time around, but it really came close to the guy I'm going to have going to the Bears with their first second-round picks. Honestly, I think I'm there with him being a first rounder. But Jack Sawyer, man, I said this year, I think he was going to be the guy between him and Tuamaloau. Which one's more likely to go in the first round? Jack Sawyer, man. 5-star athlete, and so is Tuamaloau. And that's not to say that recruiting is the reason why I'm saying that, but I just think Sawyer's athleticism, you see it more on tape, you see it on the field. And even when he was a true freshman, right? Ohio State's finding ways to get him on the field, and he's just being a QB spy, right? But that signals to me this program that has all the talent they could ever want is this true freshman is one of our best 11 on that side of the ball. Figure something out. Get him on the field. And ever since then, I'm all right, that's a guy to know. But I think he plays with power, moving tackles back into the pocket. One of his best strengths, no doubt about it. Good first step off the line of scrimmage. And again, athleticism to play. Can drop back into coverage if you ask him to. A lot of different ways you can use Jack Sawyer. And Von Miller getting up there at age. AJ Epinesa, I think Sawyer could be better than, sooner rather than later, to be honest. But that's nothing against Epinesa. He's fine. But I think there's a little bit more than fine in the potential, ceiling there for Jack Sawyer. So I really like the idea of him plus Greg Rousseau. I also think those two guys, motor machines, right? Two guys that are just not going to give up on a play. And with Rousseau's length and then Sawyer's power, man, I'm really intrigued by what that 1-2 punch could look like at the edge spot. Kansas City Chiefs, Ariante Ursary. This left tackle spot's just a headache. Wanya Morris has gotten reps at right tackle. Kingsley Suamataia has had snaps at right tackle. So I draft Ariante Ursary, who I think has played well enough to get himself back in the first round conversation. It's about where he was in the preseason mix. And then I think you let Wanya Morris, Kingsley Suamataia flip sides and battle it out for that right tackle spot. Move on from Taylor. Use that money elsewhere on the roster. Maybe a receiver, maybe a corner, right? That's a team that's starting to show some lack of depth there now with one of the Watsons out. So, go Ariante Ursary, flip those other guys over to right tackle, where they have had some cross-training for the Chiefs. Detroit Lions are next up, and I'm going to get Jonas Savaiinaea back in the first round. I am doing this as an offensive lineman. I love that they got Christian Mahogany in the 6th round. Sounds like the league might know something more than I knew, because I kind of saw him as a late day 2, early day 3 guy, 2-guard spot flexibility. But the thing is, for the Lions, yes, they have Mahogany there. I like him. They're aged up at both guard spots, and Frank Ragnall's injury history is a little iffy, so I wouldn't mind drafting one more guard and then trying to find a solid contingency plan there at center just in case you get into next year and Frank Ragnow has to miss time, especially a elongated period of time. You just don't want to have that type of a strength fall off your roster and just go to this guy who's just an absolute liability. So 7 IA, Christian Mahogany, I would love that as a 1-2 guard tandem of the future, replacing Zeitler and the other name who's now escaping me, of course. And then, again, just try to find that nice solid option there at center. And maybe they're working with Mahogany there. Lions fans, you tell me that. But hey, Senior Bowl reps at center weren't impressive. I would just stick him at guard. Anyways, let's jump into the second round. I'm going to pick it up here just because this video is potentially getting dangerously long. I'm going to go with Darian Porter. He's my type of corner, guys. Like, if you've been around this channel, long, athletic, man coverage corners, fucking nut button. Like, that is all me all day. And I do think this is a secondary that could use a little bit more size. Jack Jones is solid, but feels like some of the other guys, Jacorian Bennett, Nate Hobbs, a little bit smaller. So this receiver turned corner with this big frame, man coverage specialist, would like to see him added into the mix there. Going to another corner here for the Giants, I'm going to go Jahdae Barron. I kind of like Barron for a team that maybe needs a nickel, maybe needs an outside corner. Barron could be one of those two. I think Drew Phillips is going to be the nickel of the future for the Giants. So we are drafting Barron here to be an outside corner, complement to Deonte Banks if he's still around. It feels like they may have given up on that. I don't know. That's been kind of frustrating for someone who really liked him coming out of Maryland. But Jahdae Barron has done nothing but impress me this year at Texas. And really, I was a little skeptical about the move to the outside. I thought he just should have stayed in the slot. He's proven me wrong. He's been easily their best outside corner this year and really kind of changed my tune about who he could be. And now you got a guy who's experienced at safety, corner, nickel, just get this guy on the field. He's a good football player. Jaguars are next up here at 35. Did a last-second swap here with what order these receivers come off, but Emeka Egbuka here at 35. Parker Washington's coming off a great game. I liked him a ton coming out of Penn State. Top 10 receiver for me. Someone who I had no idea why he fell so late in that draft. Him and Antonio Johnson in that same class for the Jags. I was like, what did I not know here? That being said, I could also see where they want to go with Emeka Egbuka and maybe get a different slot option. He is a great blocker as well. No rock. No block, no rock. That's, he buys into that for sure. We'll see ultimately what happens. There's going to be a head coaching change. There's going to be a change in offensive, schematics. We'll see what type of receivers they're looking for. But I'm kind of intrigued here by an Egbuka type to this team. But again, if you think that Parker Washington's going to be their guy in the slot next year, not going to get any complaints from me. You could have easily gone with Isaiah Bond, but that's who ultimately I'm going to have be the pick here for New England. I think Isaiah Bond's just, dare I say, kind of what we wanted Kayshon Boutte to be, like coming out of LSU, like in a lot of ways. And he's inconsistent, and there's been ups and downs this year for Texas as an offense as a whole, and a lot of that stems from Quinn Ewers. I really don't think he's played a good game this year since the Michigan game, and I know he's missed time there too. So college football playoffs going to be big for Bond, and I hope that he has some big games there and can kind of move himself back into that first-round stock. He's going to light it up at the combine from the speed standpoint. There's no doubt about that. I think he's got shiftiness and nuance as a route runner at all three levels, but that could be a little inconsistent, a little spotty. And that was something that dinged Adonai Mitchell. I worry about how much that might ding Isaiah Bond this year. But his type of speed and explosiveness, complementing Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, sign me up for that. I think that's a trio that all really complement each other really well, if that is the trio long term. Jets are next up here at 37. I almost wonder if they could look at LT Overton as their John Franklin Myers, right? Like this big physical edge that you could also line up on the inside because he is just so massive. I wonder if they look at him as a John Franklin Myers replacement. I've had him in the first round a couple mocks, but here kind of top of the second round for LT Overton. But again, Jets fans, let me know what you think about that Franklin Myers replacement. I think that D-line is kind of missing one guy in maybe both spots, right? Kinlaw hasn't lived up to it. A lot of injuries there at edge. Wonder if LT Overton almost just kind of plays one size fits all for that D-line. Tennessee Titans here at 38. Tyler Boyd, one, he's just not who he once was. But two, he's a free agent, and who better to replace that than Xavier Restrepo, right? And honestly, at this point, with where Boyd's at, Restrepo might be an upgrade. He's Miami's all-time leading receiver. I've been big on Restrepo. It's just been hard to find a slot-only guy and a place for him in these mocks, but at this point, he's just such a good receiver. I need to find out where it is going to be and get him in here. I think the Titans could be an interesting landing spot, right? Ridley plays on the outside, Restrepo on the inside, and then we'll figure out what happened at quarterback. Again, I wasn't going to have two quarterbacks go here because I think a lot of these guys should go back to school. I think Milroe would be benefited by it. Beck, honestly, should just go back to Georgia. He could declare. Ewers gets a little tricky because you're probably transferring at that point. Third school in, 4 years? Don't love that. Aller definitely should go back, get one more year with Kotelnicki. Nussmeier, I think, should go back. He just looks like a first-year starter. And then Gabriel, Rourke, Dart, Leonard, they're all day three guys to me, in my opinion. Maybe Dart will change my mind, but that offense is so college gimmicky that I just have a hard time buying into it. I digress. Xavier Restrepo to the Tennessee Titans. Think they could use one more receiver. And I think you got that outside guy who's playing pretty good. You could add one more for sure, but also getting that inside threat and an upgrade over Boyd sounds pretty appealing to me. Then we get to the Cleveland Browns here at 39. A guy that I've been a little late to watch, Marcus Embo. Could be a guard, could be a tackle. Either way you spin it. Cleveland has a potential hole at left tackle with Jedrick Wills being a free agent, and they're getting old at the guard spot. So no matter what, Embo's going to find his way to being an impact player for this team on that offensive line, one way or another. And we just think about the Cleveland Browns, we think about that O-line, but this year they've taken a step back. Like, sometimes we take that strength for granted. I think they need to rebuild that strength. They've unfortunately let a strength become something other than that, and I think they just need to get back to making a strength. And again, you think about Cleveland, you think about that O-line, Marcus Embo is a way to getting back towards that, state that state of mind. All right, to the Chicago Bears. This is the guy that I almost had go to the Buffalo Bills. Would have been totally fine with it. I actually think Connor Rogers had it in his mock for NBC, so shout out Connor Rogers for doing this, having the gall to put him in the first round. I think Mike Green's there, man. He's 245 pounds, but he plays the run a lot heavier than that. Some of that's conference and level of play. But I also think the Ohio State game is one of the best games of tape you could watch for this guy from a pass rush standpoint. So super explosive off the line of scrimmage, very violent, plays with a ton of play strength, especially for a guy at 245. He exceeds your expectations there. And man, this guy just play after play after play after play. And for some people, it's more about how many pressures and what's the process. And I tend to lean into that. But at the same time, you also need these guys to finish plays. And Mike Green's got a knack for finishing plays. So yeah, get him as the edge opposite of Montez Sweat. Sign me up for that. Plus Walter Nolan in the middle. This is how we're going to turn this defensive line around for Chicago. Bears fans, don't worry, I'm going into offensive line with the next pick. But first, we got the Saints, peg between those two. I'm going to go Princely Uman-Nielen. Look, this defensive line's just not getting any better, right? Like, they put assets into it, but Peyton Turner's a miss. Isaiah Foskey, Notre Dame fan here, that's been a miss. Brian Brzee, I know he had some early sack production, but watch the tape. It's not as good as the production may have seemed, and I think that production has gone by the wayside because of that. It's really Carl Granderson, and it's, not much else. So Princely Uman-Nielen, a guy who I've been high on since he was at Florida. Love the bend, love the first step. I think he plays the run pretty well for someone who's 245, 250 pounds. But yeah, this team's got to continue to pour resources to that defensive line because they're just not getting the results that they've been looking for. All right, Chicago, as promised, we're going to go Donovan Jackson, interior offensive lineman here. Plays left guard for Ohio State. Don't watch the Penn State game where he played left tackle. It's not his position. 5-star athlete, awesome on the move. Like this is a guy who should be playing the next level. Ideally in a zone blocking scheme where you're tapping into his athleticism. So curious to see what the head coaching, hire and what the offensive schematics then become there in Chicago. But they need to either find a center or a guard, right? Like I think they can be improved upon from Matt Pryor. He already was a step up from Nate Davis. Or you look at replacing Shelton there at center. Here, I thought the value was just a little bit better for Drake Jackson, a guy that I'm pretty high on compared to consensus, but I like him a lot at that guard spot. Then we get to the Cincinnati Bengals here at 43. I'm going to go Donovan Ezeracco. So corner and edge. Tell me what that doesn't tell you what I think about this Cincinnati defense. I don't know what will, but a guy who really unique frame, 6'2", 247 pounds, long arms. So he's got first step quicks, a little bit of bend, but he can also long arm you with the best of them too. So really fun player to watch, and he's been really productive this year for Boston College, and easily one of the best parts of that defense. And for Cincinnati, you hope to bring Hendrickson back and then get more. This is the more that you're looking to add, and plus hopefully steps forward for Miles Murphy and company there on the defensive line. All right, Dallas Cowboys here at 44. I'm staying on the offensive side of the ball. I'm going to go Alec Ayumanner. Very different type of receiver than what I mocked. I typically go speed receiver here to be like a Brandon Cooks replacement. It kind of feels like an easy sell. But I also wonder if they just kind of want more of a possession type, right? Keep CeeDee Lamb. You can play him outside still, just as the Y, and get him off the line of scrimmage. But I'd almost just move him full-time in a slot, right? Like give him three-way goes instead of two-way goes. More options for a player like that. Sign me up. So I like Ayumanner as your sacrificial X. Just does the little things, right? Physical guy, can win at the catch point, solid route runner. I think a good enough athlete to be able to separate the next level. And again, I think a guy you just throw on the outside and can be a quarterback's best friend with his frame and his hands. So yeah, I like him as that outside threat. Move CeeDee Lamb inside. Plus Ashton Jeanty. We're getting some firepower to that offense as Dak hopefully returns to 100%. San Francisco 49ers back on the clock as promised. I'm going to go interior defensive line. Deion Walker, right? Like, this team before Javon Hargrave got hurt, it was Hargrave, Bosa, and bust. Like, no one else making anything. Now Hargrave's out, and also Bosa's battling injuries. We've already drafted an edge to try to take a little bit of weight off of Bosa's shoulders. I think the same should be true about Javon Hargrave. At the minimum, right, like Hargrave's had two different points in his career. The Steelers, really good run defender. Goes to Philly, becomes an awesome pass rusher, and that's kind of what he's continued to do at San Francisco. Minimum, you draft Deion Walker, and that man is massive. 367 pounds, he's going to plug the middle and shore up that run defense, which has been up and down this year for San Francisco. Or you have Deion Walker, this freak athlete at an insane size, learning from one of the game's best interior defensive pass rushers. That's a great mentor-mentee relationship I want to set up there. So Deion Walker hasn't fully hit the first-round hype that was there for him before the season, but he's still a massive human being, and few people that big move the way he does. He's going to go somewhere in the top 50, and I think San Francisco would be wise to pounce on that opportunity. So kind of like what we did earlier for Cleveland, right? Like get that strength back to being a strength. 2 picks here for San Francisco. Let's get that D-line back to what people just naturally think it's going to be because, well, it's the 49ers. They always have a good D-line. Let's actually get them back to that. Miami Dolphins here at 46. We actually have a couple safeties come off the board. Nick Emmanwori, look, Jordan Poyer, I think it's time for him to hang it up. Like, no disrespect, he's been one of the best safeties of my generation. Him and Micah Hyde in Buffalo was like a staple of my childhood up until literally last year. But Emmanwori could be this like hybrid linebacker, box safety type. I think this frees up. I mean, Javon Holland can play anywhere. He can play slot, he can play in the box, play over the top. Part of the reason why I loved him so much coming out of college and why he was right there with Javon Merrick as my safety too. But honestly, I wish I stuck to my gut and made him safety 1. I would look like a smart man there. But I digress. He has a ton of flexibility, but ultimately I do think his best play has come when he's playing that over-the-top true free safety. And with Anthony Weaver, you're going to get some too high shells where both these guys play over the top, definitely. But I think, hey, if you're going single high cover 3, let's get Holland deep, making plays, taking advantage of that athleticism, and let's get Emmanwori in the box. He'll shore up that linebacker play. He'll shore up that run defense. Really been impressed with Emmanwori this season. Been one of these guys who wasn't really on my radar and then all of a sudden thrusted onto my radar, and for damn good reason. To the Indianapolis Colts, Julian Blackmon's going to be a free agent this offseason. And if they retain Gus Bradley as the defensive coordinator, could see that change. But even anybody else they bring in, cover 3 is going to be a big part of that. It just so happens Gus Bradley lives in cover 3. But whether it's Gus Bradley or someone else, getting a true over-the-top free safety playmaker like Xavier Watts would be awesome. Watts has been a little frustrating. Again, Notre Dame fan here. First 4 games, he hadn't missed a tackle. And I was like, oh my God, we've done something here. We've made some major progress with Xavier Watts. He's now got a missed tackle rate up and over 13%, which isn't like ideal. So it's kind of come down towards, he's regressed towards the mean, we'll say. So that's not great, but I think is that true over-the-top free safety, playmaker, ball skills, they're all there. And the ability to just kind of sit, wait, let that quarterback make that mistake. He's just got a great feel for that. When to pounce on it, when to jump that route. And just a natural playmaker there on the back end. So especially if it's Gus Bradley, let this guy play that over-the-top center field role because he will be awesome at it. Just needs to clean up that tackling. I think he could be an even better player. He's going to be at the Senior Bowl, so I'm excited to potentially see him there. Then we get to Carolina here at 48. This was just like, I let Colston Loveland fall too far when making this mock, and I had to stop it here. Tommy Tremble's coming off a solid game, and he's had some okay production, but imagine a better version of Tommy Tremble, and you might get something like Colston Loveland, right? There's a better receiver. Tremble may have him as a blocker, but I don't think Loveland's a liability there. If anything, having a Tommy Tremble be your inline tight end almost might free up Loveland to get more advantageous matchups, get him off the line of scrimmage, free him up, and give him an extra step in his head start when leaving and starting the play. So it may ultimately work out for him, but a guy where the production's not going to match the skill set. He's a great receiver. It's just Michigan's had a hard time passing the ball this season, unfortunately. But this was just too good a value. Couldn't let him get past 48 here in the Carolina Panthers. All right, Arizona Cardinals at pick 49. Another guy who just accepted his Senior Bowl invite, Landon Jackson. 6'7", long arms, 280 pounds. This is your old school power rusher right here. So we went interior defensive line. Now we're getting that edge guy. Because, a lot of the guys they have right now, Baron Browning, linebacker converted to edge, not the biggest guy. BJ Ojolari, not the biggest guy. Landon Jackson, this dude's got mass for days, pause. But I think he could be that competent on the other side, that edge that plays with power, wins with length, and then you have some speed rushers on the other side. And basically, you just play mismatch against tackles. What do they struggle with? This guy struggles with length. All right, Landon Jackson, you're rushing from that side. This guy really struggles with small, bendy edge rushers. BJ Ojolari, that's your dude. Baron Browning, that's your guy. And I just think it creates a lot of fun mismatches you can create. And Jonathan Gannon's a great defensive coach. I think we can all agree to that now. And I think he would fully take advantage of that. Back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Levante David continues to play some solid football, but I think his age is starting to show. And then that other off-ball linebacker spot is a question mark with Devin White gone. For right now, again, Jalen Walker is an edge rusher to me, not an off-ball linebacker. Jahad Campbell right now, my top off-ball linebacker. Just a great downhill player, also solid athleticism, good feel for zone coverage, kind of just like a solid player across the board. I do think he can be used as a blitzer, and maybe he's a little bit better crashing downhill. I affectionately describe linebackers as either downhill or backpedal guys, right? Like downhill guys who play the run and blitz really well, or guys who are better playing in coverage, right, and backpedaling, right? Just as oversimplification for the sake of making an easy argument. I do think Campbell's probably a little bit closer to being that downhill guy versus backpedaling, but that's not to say he's like a zone liability or anything. But specifically for a fit with Todd Bowles, who likes to blitz, I think Jahad Campbell would be a really interesting fit in that defense. Atlanta Falcons here at 51. I'm going to go Maxwell Hairston. The return from injury hasn't been great, but I still think that you go back to the tape before this year, there's some natural zone instincts there. Raheem Morris, primarily quarters and cover 3. Clark Phillips, I think, again, he's just a little small for me. I'd like to see him in the nickel. He hasn't played bad on the outside. It's not like he's burned that bridge or anything. But I would just maybe prefer to see if we can get Hairston on the outside, move Clark Phillips inside. I think that would be my preferred outcome for that Atlanta secondary. But I just like his zone instincts, and even if Clark Phillips continues to play well, it's just good to have that depth. One more guy behind him to add just in case, injuries, things like that. And also, you're going to be rotating these guys in. So, and maybe Hairston becomes that nickel too. That's another possibility here. But to me, I think Hairston outside. Let's move Clark Phillips inside. All right, Seattle here at 52. I feel like Luke Handler's kind of been forgotten about. 2 great years of PFF grading, and feels like no one's really talking about him, and I can't even find him here on the board. I'm thinking he's going to test pretty well, and then he's going to be one of these names that resurfaces. If I'm wrong on that, that's probably the reason no one's talking about him. But yeah, 2 years of awesome PFF grading. The tape checks out. Not the biggest school, but not necessarily like a liability when it comes to like who he plays. And again, as long as the athletic testing checks out, he's good to go. He's played at right guard the last 2 years for Cincy, so a new right tackle, a new right guard. Let's go figure this out. I know center is also the other spot where you're trying to figure it out. But, especially with Connor Williams retiring mid-year. Whoops. But I'm going to keep my eyes on Ola Oluwatimi. I liked him coming out of Michigan. Thought he was better than a 6th-round pick. So I'm monitoring that situation. Maybe a center moving forward for Seattle here in the second. All right, Houston at 53. I'm going to have TJ Sanders be the pick here. Went interior offensive line. The other main spot I think they can get better is interior defensive line. Just a little bit more firepower, right? They have a couple guys who are like solid run stoppers, but not bringing a lot of pass rush juice. Sanders is going to stop the run, and I think there's some upside there as a pass rusher. So I think he's the interior defensive lineman. Now, 2 years running, I've been looking for the Texans to add, and I just think, add that dude in between Danielle Hunter and company. That could be a really, really fun, scary defensive line to face, but a really fun one to watch. Denver Broncos here at 54. Broncos fans, let me know what you think about this. I'm going to go Harold Perkins here. I know you just traded Baron Browning, this converted linebacker to edge. You may want to do the same thing here with Harold Perkins just because he's a little light, and do you want that guy in the box playing the run? Maybe not. But I also think you can hide him with another off-ball linebacker who maybe does play a little bit more with more mass and is more that prototypical run-stopping linebacker. But here with Perkins plus Vance Joseph, a guy who likes to send pressure with his linebackers, Perkins' athleticism and pass rush skill set feels like a really interesting fit with what Vance Joseph could use him as a blitzer from up the middle. Also could be the next version of Baron Browning, right, and try to convert him to be an off-ball linebacker. That being said, trading Baron Browning does not make that an easy argument, so I'm more trying to sell this from Vance Joseph likes blitzing linebackers. Harold Perkins is a downhill crasher. Yes, he needs to add mass to not get moved around in the run game, but from a blitzing pass rush standpoint, he's a really fun idea to add into that Vance Joseph defense. All right, Baltimore Ravens next up. I'm going to go Tate Ratledge. I think plug and play. This is your Daniel Falele replacement. Not that Falele's been bad, but I do think you can get better there. Ratledge probably a little bit more gap scheme than zone for me, but an awesome pass protector too. And right, we're trying to keep that pocket clean for Lamar, avoid as many hits as we can on our franchise guy, keep him healthy, and also just maintaining clean pocket, letting him have scramble lanes, etc., etc. Been really impressed with Ratledge specifically as a pass protector this year. All right, Washington's next up, 56. This is more of like a designated pass rush type, but at the same time, B.J. Ojulari went before this pick in the draft that he came out. Josiah Stewart is just awesome. And he's actually played the run really well from a PFF grading standpoint. So maybe he's got that same Mike Green. Yeah, he's 245, but he plays it bigger than that. When it comes to first step juice and getting the quarterback, man, like that Michigan defensive line has got some dudes, no doubt about it. But I just love the quicks and the finesse that Josiah Stewart brings to the table. And I think Washington can handle a DPR specialist right now because Dorrance Armstrong can play early downs and stop the run, right? Or even Jean-Baptiste, the Ohio State to Notre Dame transfer, and then they took him in the 7th round. He's been a solid run defender. And I almost went JT to him Loau, but it feels like JTT is just like the first round version of Jean-Baptiste. So you could still do that, but I just wanted to go with a different body type. Let those guys play the early down, play the run downs, and then Josiah Stewart on your money downs, your pass, third and longs, passing situations. Let this guy pin his ears back. Go to the quarterback. He's already proven he can do it at a high level this year at Michigan. All right, to the LA Chargers. My number 2 running back comes off the board. Pump this into my veins, right? Like, imagine Gus Edwards with juice. There's more to Amari and Hampton than that, but like, just for the simplicity of the argument, imagine that, would you? And J.K. Dobbins, just hard to rely on him, just given the injury history. Another year where he's been good this year, but Dobbins goes on IR. It's just like, it feels like you're waiting for that notification every single year. And I'm a big Kamani Vidal guy. He was my RB6 last year, and I think there's a world where Vidal plus Hampton could be your long-term fixture there in the backfield. Would love that, but for Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh, they want to play Smash Mouth. Amari and Hampton fits into that identity. Green Bay Packers here at 58. I'm going to go Logan Jones. I think it's the same thing I did in my last mock, but he's a center that's going under the radar for a lot of people right now, and he shouldn't be. Wrestling background. He's going to be around the same weight as Tyler Linderbaum, so no concerns there. Love the movement skills. Josh Myers, easily the weak link so far on that Green Bay offensive line. I shouldn't say so far. Has been continuously the weak link on that offensive line, so replacing one second-round center with another. I think Logan Jones, that upgrade we're looking for, that Packers O-line. Steelers here at 59. This is a tough one. You could go receiver, and you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to go receiver. I was thinking corner and maybe safety here. I'm going to go Trey Harris. Kind of feels like a guy who would fit in with Russell Wilson. We'll see if he's back. If they make the playoffs, and especially if they're like 2 seed, 3 seed, Steelers are probably going to re-sign him, which is really interesting and makes me wonder, what the long-term projection of my favorite team is. But, another video for another day. But Trey Harris, like Mike Williams was juice, right? Like, And Harris has missed time this year, and he's not quite the contested catch ball winner that Mike Williams was, especially when he's fully healthy and freshly out of Clemson. But field stretcher with that type of body type, I think it's a nice compliment opposite of George Pickens. And really just like one more guy who can stretch the field. We've already seen where just like a guy who can push the ball deep down the field opens up so much underneath, and really with the run game. Now adding one more threat at the receiver spot who can do that, I think makes it that much more of a legitimate thing to buy into with the Steelers team. Are they going to actually keep running the ball well? Well, they just got another field stretcher. Team's got to respect that. So, yeah. All right, let's go on to back-to-back picks here, actually, from the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to go Tyleik Williams. This is that interior defensive lineman body type that I want with Ed Oliver. Not a heavy guy for a defensive tackle, that is. For me, yes. But, like, for a D tackle, not the biggest dude and not great against the run. Tyleik Williams is a specialist at just that. And if you watch that Ohio State-Michigan game, he had I think it was the first goal line series for Ohio State. That first play, him and Jack Sawyer both blew it up, and he's got plays like that all over his tape. This guy is just a missile in the run game. Like, he's just going to find a way to get a TFL. He's blowing it up, moving centers all the way back into the backfield. Love Tyleik Williams from that standpoint. TBD on what he is as a pass rusher. I'm not seeing a whole lot there, but run stopper next to Ed Oliver, who's your pass rusher, that's a 1-2 punch I can live with. Here at 61, we go Jabbar Muhammad. I just think a guy with really nice zone, feel and zone coverage, and a really solid athlete. Another guy who could PFF grading, maybe going a little under the radar right now, but I think he totally fits with what Sean McDermott's going to do. Primarily running zone. I've given a couple different options here. It could be Maxwell Hairston if he makes it here. It could be Kobe Bryant I've mocked here. It could be Tommy Hill from Nebraska. A lot of different zone coverage specialists that I think could make some sense here. Russell Douglas getting a little bit older. Wouldn't be bad to just get one more guy into that room. Philadelphia here at 62. This is another pick I've made a handful of times. Emory Jones Jr. Maybe he's your Lane Johnson replacement long-term at right tackle. Maybe you view Emory Jones as a guard. And then here we get an interesting kind of Mekhi Becton career arc in an offseason for Emory Jones. Big guy, plays tackle. Well, we're going to move him inside. And we'll see. Philadelphia may bring back Becton, but let's just say Becton goes and gets money elsewhere. Jones then becomes either a Becton replacement, or you keep Becton and Emory Jones kind of sits, waits in the wings, and then he gets to learn from, probably the best right tackle of my generation, right? Like him and Ryan Ramczyk, probably, of, someone who's 27, probably the best right tackles we've seen in our lives. So, yeah, be a great person for him to learn from, no doubt about it. All right, here at 63, I'm going to give Takario Davis to the Chiefs. Hasn't been the year that I wanted it to be for Takario, but still big, physical, go get your receiver at the line of scrimmage type of man coverage corner. Spags wants to do that, and we saw with the Watson injury, now this team's starting to get a little thin at corner. They haven't normally prioritized drafting guys, with the exception of Trent McDuffie, at corner this high. I think this is the year where you maybe buck that trend and get another Spagnuolo type, long, lengthy, go get your guy at the line of scrimmage press corner. And yeah, I think there could be some growing pains, but also like Arizona as a whole took a step back this year, so I'm having a hard time, and I'm big into this. Like, I think coaching's huge, because sometimes guys I think are talented, but the team underperforms, so therefore they leave a little meat on the bone. And like with where Arizona was going into this year, and like how we felt about specifically Tacario Davis, or like Noah Fafita is another good example of this year coaching change, and they both kind of take steps back. So that's a little disappointing, but some of that's also just like you made a coaching change, and that impacts everybody in that room. So I think Tacario Davis ultimately could get back to the NFL level and get back to playing like he did 2 years ago. Also should note here, it's a corner that comes with insane variance, right? Like 1 year you could be a top 10 corner, the next year really struggle. So, this position comes with a lot of variance in and of itself. But I do think Tacario Davis is a Spagnuolo type of corner, and the type that they would want to add in there, at least for contingency of injuries. All right, last pick we're going to talk about. Dude, I love the idea because of the Detroit Lions drafting Kyle Kennard. Aiden Hutchinson is like Mr. Motor of an edge rusher, man. The man just does not give up on a play. And in a lot of ways, Kyle Kennard is not far off in that regard. So I just love the idea of a Kennard plus Aiden Hutchinson tandem rushing off the edge. I would be really, really hyped to get to see that if it were to play out like it did in this mock draft. Speaking of this mock draft, let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who went too high? Who went too low? Who's your favorite squad? And what did you think about the haul that I gave your team? Anything you have to say? It's not wrong. It's not right. It's just your take. I want to hear yours just like you sat through and listened to mine. I'm going to try to respond to as many comments as I possibly can. Things are getting pretty busy, especially as I'm getting more and more involved in where my draft coverage is potentially moving. A little bit of a spoiler there. But again, be sure to keep an eye on the channel. Subscribe if you haven't. If you're a big fan of my draft content, it will be continuing through this year. Don't worry. But going to have that announcement up by the end of this month. So really excited to talk about it before we get into the new year. And if you're a big fan of my draft content, like I said, keep your eyes peeled. But thank you again for watching this, especially if you made it to this point. You are a rock star. You are a GOAT for making it this far. I really appreciate you. Leave some comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time, my name is Tej, and I am